Hello and welcome to Mississippi Insight. I'm Byron Brown. Thank you for joining us. As of tonight, we are exactly 10 days from the Mississippi primary. Voters will decide who's running in a number of statewide races, including governor. Just this week, WJTV hosted all three Republican candidates for governor right here in this studio. Lieutenant Governor Tate Reeves, Representative Robert Foster, and former Chief Justice Bill Waller covered issues ranging from teacher pay to the state flag and beyond. So who won? Well, someone who's watched politics in this state for a long time says the real winner was none of the above. We're talking with Marshall Ramsey, cartoonist and editor-at-large for Mississippi Today. He joins us in studio. And Marshall, you were at Mississippi Today's watch party and shared some of your sketches. And you said the real winner
was the bell.
The bell.
The bell.
About
ding,
the bell.
ding, 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 ding.
What was it about that bell that you liked?
It was a clear voice. You heard it often. No, I'll be honest with you. I think the people of Mississippi won that debate because it was a chance for us to see the candidates in more of, I mean, granted it wasn't in nature, but it was not a scripted television commercial. And I think your questions were great, and I think it really was a good opportunity for us to size up the candidates.
And when you talked about the issues, what was it about the issues that you thought Mississippians got away with?
Well, I tell you, there were a lot of issues, everything from education, even to the flag. I mean, by the way, congratulations. I'm not here to be nice to you, because I mean, I'll draw your cartoon later. But I think the questions that y'all asked were very relevant, and it was kind of fun to watch them either pivot or try to answer it and everything else. But honestly, you know, because a lot of times in commercials you get red meat, you get to hear, you know, liberal, or whatever the thing may be. But when you're talking about everything that's pocketbook issues for Mississippians, education, talking about roads, I mean, y'all covered it all, and I want to say thank you.
You were sketching while you were at the watch party. Let's look at some of the sketches and what you were talking about.
Let's do that.
What were you thinking about when you were making the sketches?
You know, that's really the most fun way to draw, is just to sit there and just kind of have a free throw. I first started off with Waller sitting there grinning, because he looked kind of like the Cheshire Cat the whole time, just kind of had a little grin on his face and so forth. And then I went over to Tate, and I kind of had him having a word salad of all the different things he was saying. I had toxic algae blooms and the national liberal media or gateway drug that ruins people's lives. And so it just kind of made this long string. But it really, I think some of them actually turned out to be pretty good cartoons.
Yeah, I got you. And I know before this sketch came out, you have the other ones that you put up before the debate that said where you had a Foster, my truck, my debate rules.
Exactly.
On the broken bridge, I guess that was.
It did. Yeah, I had one where I had them on where I hoped they would be on the broken bridge as a debate stage, and then the second one was where he burst through and saying that. And
there we go. There's the one there.
That one there too. So that was fun. And then I had Tate worried about the license plate.
I know. I think you even had us up there as the panelists, and you had Gerald Harris on the panel.
You know what? He already made that his little avatar for Twitter, so he was pretty happy about that.
Yeah, I don't think we've ever been one of your cartoons before.
Well, I'm just going to have to make.
I don't know. Should we feel honored about that?
I'm about to say, do you want to be a regular? We can make that happen. I know people.
Yeah.
So
when we talk about the debate, though, as
Sure.
you're looking at that, you know, what is it that you thought was, I guess, one of the key points of the debate, or the key issues that people needed to hear from the candidates?
Well, I think that was really a lot of people's first exposure to Foster since the blow up last week with what happened with Larison and the my truck, my rules and so forth. And it was really a chance for them to kind of size him up and get to see what he was all about. I actually thought he did pretty well he did better than I thought he would. I'm not saying he was great or wonderful or anything like that, but he wasn't bad. And I've heard that from a lot of people. Justice Waller, it was very good to hear him talk about the issues a little bit, about some of the things he'd say. I mean, obviously he's got credentials. He's, you know, Supreme Court Justice. He was general. I mean, he's got that. But it was good to see him talking about some of the issues. And then, of course, Tate, you know, we've known him for 12 years, but it was good to see him kind of express, just kind of get his personality out there a little bit.
And you think anyone, I guess, walked away in any better position than they were when they came into the debate?
I think Foster did. I really do. Waller maybe was a draw, and it may have hurt Tate a little bit because he had the most to lose. He's the front runner, he had the most cash. A lot of people thought, well, he's just going to walk away with this because he's basically, you know, almost like the incumbent being the lieutenant governor. But I don't know. I heard a lot of negative things on Twitter and from people at the watch party about that. And there were both Democrats and Republicans at the watch party, so it was across the board on that. So it may have hurt him a little bit.
I know when this My Truck, My Rules with Foster 2 weeks before the debate, and then and then we had 4 weeks before the primary, he got some traction, a lot of national media and everything else. And he doesn't have a whole lot of money, and he's relatively unknown. How do you think this might play into with this primary and whether there's a runoff here?
I think that right there is what could happen. I think it technically could kick Waller and Tate into a runoff. And of course, that would be interesting. And who would have ever thunk, seriously, 2 years ago, that would even be talking about a runoff at this point?
Right. And so Foster, does he have a chance, do you think, 2 weeks out? Or do you think his poll numbers are still down, but do you think he gets some last-minute push here?
It's Mississippi. Anything's possible. I don't know, though. I think Waller has got he's got more name recognition and so forth. It just depends. I mean, is there that subset of the Republican Party that voted for Chris McDaniel? Do they see something maybe in Foster that they like? Are they going to come out and vote for him? Is Waller going to? But I think probably Foster peels off more of Tate's votes because Tate's running more as the pure conservative, and Waller's kind of voting as, I'm the compassionate, conservative, I'm the nice guy kind of thing. So it might actually hurt Tate more than it would Waller.
If you're a Democratic candidate that was watching, if you're Jim Hood or one of the other candidates watching, what do you think they were thinking as they were watching that debate, and what's that put them right now?
They probably, number one, I wish they had debated. I'd like to see a debate with them. But number two, I think they were looking, if I were Hood, I would sit there and still worry about Tate because I think that's who he's going to be up against. But Waller would be probably a stronger candidate against him. In fact, we've actually had some polling that showed that Waller was a stronger candidate against Hood. So. Well,
the 2 polls came out showing that Hood and that Waller and Tate Reeves would actually beat Hood.
Right, exactly. So no, if I'm watching it right now, it's like, okay, I really need to start hustling.
Yeah. When you're doing your cartoons, what features are you looking for when you're looking at these candidates out there? I mean, what are you actually looking at when you're kind of drawing the candidates or you're drawing folks? What are you looking for?
Okay, Jack Davis, Mad Magazine. I met him in 1988. This is when I was a young college guy.
Right.
He told me to make sure you get the eyes right.
Okay.
Always get the eyes right because when you and I talk to each other, we're looking at each other in the eyes. So you always try to get the eyes right. Like, for instance, I could never draw George W. Bush well until I figured out his eyes were kind of like his dad's eyes. Get the eyes right. With Tate, he's got the glasses, he's got kind of the long nose, and I mean, I modeled him after, there was an old ad that used to be on with the Mac and the PC guy.
Right.
Back about 12 years ago. And so he looked kind of like the PC guy. So I've always drawn him that way. With Waller, well, you got the hair, you got the glasses, you got the grin. And so you just kind of take that. Foster, as you can tell by the cartoon I drew, I was struggling with him all night.
Right.
Couldn't get him. So.
Couldn't get him at all?
Couldn't get him at all.
I got you.
Hey, we all have our days.
And what motivates you, I guess, when you're starting to draw? I mean, is there something you're listening to that says, oh, I need to draw that?
That's how it works. I'll be listening, I'll hear something that'll make me laugh, or I think, oh, that's crazy, or that shouldn't be that way. And so it gets a reaction. Like I said, there was a scene, like for instance, there was one scene where Tate suddenly just smiled out of nowhere. And it was like all of a sudden he must have remembered, I got to smile. And he smiled. And so I did a little drawing of him as Cheshire Tate with the smile on it. But yeah, that's how my brain works. I think it was too many headwinds playing football.
So at the end of the day, you said the debate was good for the people.
I think it was good for the people. I think it was, and I tweeted out that night, I said, there's going to be 2 different opinions of this debate. There's going to be the people like me and like, of course, you that watched it all the way through. And then there's going to be people that see little snippets of it on social media, because then you get a completely different debate that way because you get little bits and pieces. But I think all the way through, it was good. I felt like that after watching it and after your questions that I had a better feel for the candidates.
All right, sounds good. Thank you. Mark Ramsey, thank you for joining us.
Always good to see you.
And straight ahead, as Republicans look to take back the office of the Attorney General, we sit down with Andy Taggert, and we'll be right back. Welcome back. 3 Republicans are in the race for Attorney General, trying to take back the seat currently held by Democrat Jim Hood. We're talking to all 3 candidates, and tonight we're joined by Attorney Andy Taggert. Let's start by looking at some of the issues, including illegal drugs. This issue is very personal to you. Explain why this is so personal to you.
Well, I'm sorry to report, and as many of your viewers will know, my wife and I lost our youngest son at age 21 almost exactly 7 years ago to suicide, Byron, after a year of illicit drug use. And as you would appreciate, that completely rocked our worlds, but it also has very much shaped our view of what needs to happen going forward. And I make no apologies about the fact that I'm steely-eyed in my conviction that we must do something about the drug predators who are poisoning our kids.
I know we talk a lot about opioids and the problems of opioids. How do you plan to tackle that issue and also the drugs that plagued your son?
You know, opioids obviously is a separate issue altogether and a very important one, but I really believe the way to address that is at the regulatory level. Except for the opioids that are illegally and artificially manufactured, opioids are legal medications and there are appropriate uses for them in appropriate cases, and we shouldn't tell doctors that they can't prescribe them, but we have to deal with that on the regulatory side. In my judgment, the far graver issue and the much greater problem is illicit drugs and the predators that are poisoning our kids and hurting people in the process of trying to make money doing it.
So as Attorney General, what would you do or what would you change that we're not doing now?
In my estimation, the main thing that the Attorney General ought to be doing is serving as the state's chief law enforcement official. And that means pressing resources to the local level where our local crime fighters on the streets, our sheriff's departments, our police departments, and the DAs that are supporting them have the resources that they need. Maybe that means more boots on the ground. Maybe it means additional cash resources. Maybe it means additional training. Maybe it means more assistant DAs assigned from the Attorney General's office. Whatever the local crime fighters on the street tell me they need, I'm going to be about the business of trying to free up for them.
Jim Hood has focused a lot on cybercrime, but you've talked about backing off maybe a little bit on cybercrimes. Why is that?
Really not backing off. What I would like to see is the legislature to authorize the Attorney General to utilize the resources of his office in a way that provides what is needed on the streets. Right now, the legislature sort of silos different areas of responsibility for the Attorney General, and the manner in which the office is staffed is directed by those statutory silos. I think the much better way to do it would be to allow the Attorney General, as the chief law enforcement official, to make judgments about how to put those resources to work.
You've talked about how the Attorney General has also used private attorneys to fight some of the battles. Explain your position on that.
My position is that occasionally there will be times when outside counsel is required. For the most part, the Attorney General's office itself ought to be managing litigation on behalf of the people of Mississippi. But when outside counsel is required, the Attorney General ought to go out with a request for proposals, seek competitive proposals, first of all from Mississippi law firms, and only after making the judgment that this case requires such expertise or is of such scope or such complexity that I need outside counsel, only then hiring private attorneys.
Yeah, there's been a lot of talk from your opponents that saying that you're not conservative enough. You're not the Trump Republican. What do you stand on that?
You know, I love when I'm criticized for not being conservative enough. I was a Republican before Republican was cool in the state of Mississippi. I ran Ronald Reagan's college and university campus campaign in 1980 and then his re-election effort in 1984 in Mississippi. And as you'll recall, was chief of staff and counsel to Governor Kirk Fordyce, the first Republican, and no one's ever accused him of not being a conservative, the first Republican governor in the modern era. The disagreements I had with Kirk Fordyce were not philosophical. They were stylistic in the manner in which he undertook some of his activities, but it was not what he believed about government.
And so you spent a lot of time talking about the state flag, and you're one of the few Republicans saying that something needs to be changed after 18 years after the vote was in 2001. Your position on that is the legislature needs to make a decision. Talk about your position on the state flag.
My position very much is that it's time to retire the state flag to our Museum of Mississippi History. We have a brand new, wonderful Museum of Mississippi History. We ought to have a dignified retirement for the state flag and allow the people of Mississippi to decide what they want to use as their banner for going forward. My concern, Byron, is that the state flag is a snapshot of Mississippi that no longer accurately reflects our state. And it certainly doesn't reflect where we want our state to be going in 5 years or 25 years from today. So my judgment is it's just time to retire it and move forward with a new banner that all Mississippians can be enthusiastic about.
Is it hurting the state economically and recruiting businesses and recruiting people to come to the state?
Well, you know, I'm not an economic developer, so I don't have proof positive in my own life's experience to say that the answer to that is yes. But what I will tell you is all the economic developers that I know have told me that the answer to that question is yes. But I think from my perspective, I must say, I'm really not driven by that economic interest. I'm driven by what I believe is right. And in this case, I just believe it's right to retire that flag and to have a banner that is a symbol that all Mississippians can enthusiastically rally under.
When you take that position, do you think it's going to hurt your campaign to be on that side of the issue on the state flag?
You know, I don't mind telling you, there have been some folks who've told me they're just not going to vote for me because of my view on that. And my response to them is a couple of things. One is, if you're going to single out that single issue, you know, what I think about the state flag as a determinant to make your decision, then God bless you, you need to make that decision. But on the other hand, think about what it is really that the Attorney General is going to be about and what you might want if you were hiring your own attorney. My guess is you wouldn't even ask your attorney what his position is on the state flag. You'd want to know, what's your courtroom experience? What is your record before the Mississippi Supreme Court? What is your record before the Mississippi Court of Appeals? What's your record before the Federal District Court in Jackson? Those are the courts that the Attorney General appears before, and those are the courts before which I undertake my profession almost all the time in the work that I'm doing as an attorney.
All right, and we'll have much more with Andy Taggert after this. And welcome back. We are joined by Andy Taggert. One of three Republicans are running for Attorney General. You're in a three-way race now, and you have different from your opponents. So what's different from your opponents, Mark Baker and Lynn Finch? What do you say is different between those two opponents you're running against?
Well, I'll tell you, I think the thing that really distinguishes me in this race is that the top three Republican policymakers in our state, when they've needed lawyers, but the Attorney General would not represent their position, they hired me. When Kirk Fordyce needed a lawyer because Mike Moore would not take the legal posture that the governor believed was the right one, Kirk Fordyce hired me. When Haley Barbour needed a lawyer to argue in favor of voter ID at the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals down in New Orleans, Attorney General Jim Hood would not take that position, so Haley Barbour hired me. When Phil Bryant was still state auditor and he wanted to go after the illegal attorney's fees arising out of the WorldCom tax case, Jim Hood wouldn't take that position either, so Phil Bryant hired me. So I think the thing that distinguishes me from the other candidates is decisions that have been made by our state's top Republican policymakers in retaining me as their lawyer on behalf of the taxpayers when the Attorney General wouldn't do the job that he was supposed to do.
So as Attorney General, do you plan to go out and fight the cases yourself?
In my judgment, it's very important to the people of Mississippi that their Attorney General be able to go and fight cases himself. In fact, a great example of that would be in the case of the fetal heartbeat bill that our legislature passed in this last session. As you know, a claim was immediately raised against the constitutionality of that statute. Our Attorney General didn't even show up at the hearing. My judgment is that the Attorney General ought to be leading the charge on those kinds of very important key policy issues, defending the position that the people of Mississippi have taken when their legislature adopts matters into law.
Speaking of the fetal heartbeat bill, where do you stand on that issue, and what do you think is going to happen with the fetal heartbeat?
Well, I'm strongly pro-life, and I strongly commend the legislature for adopting that piece of legislation and the governor for signing it. I'm very distressed that the Attorney General didn't think it was important enough to show up at the hearing to try to defend the statute, and then when he raised his hands a few days later and said, well, no worries, I'm going to appeal it to the Fifth Circuit. Well, frankly, Byron, I am worried. I'm worried about the zeal and the enthusiasm with which he will take that appeal, given the fact that he didn't even show up for the hearing. If I had been Attorney General, I would have zealously been arguing in favor of the constitutionality of that statute at the federal district court level, and if we lost that hearing, I'd be leading the charge myself to the Fifth Circuit.
Do you think it's something that will make it to the Supreme Court and have it stay in court there?
You know, if not this statute, some will soon, either from Mississippi or from another state. But my position is that we ought to continue to provide opportunities for the United States Supreme Court to rethink its view on the question of Roe versus Wade and in the protection of life in this state and in this country.
What is your message to voters? You got a couple weeks before the primary. What do you want to leave with voters?
What I really would like to leave with voters is the conviction that Karen and I have that the Attorney General's #1 job is as chief law enforcement official of the state. And the gravest danger that we face, Byron, is not Google's search algorithm. It's not the price of milk in the school cafeteria. It is the drug predators poisoning our kids and trying to make money doing it.
Andy Taggert, thank you very much for joining us.
It's an honor to have been with you. Thank you, Byron.
Thank you. And we'll be right back. Democrats will try to maintain control of the Attorney General's office come November. WJTV 12's Gerald Harris introduces us to Jennifer Riley Collins, the lone Democrat bidding to become Mississippi's top prosecutor.
The Lord has given me many gifts.
Jennifer Riley Collins is a retired United States Army colonel. She says Mississippi is ready for change.
Mississippi has come a long way, but we still have a long way to go. And the law is an equalizer.
Democrats may currently control the AG's office, but Collins faces an uphill battle with the lack of name recognition.
When people hear my story, when people hear my message, and they know that I am someone who is ready to go to work for them, they're inspired. They will come out and vote.
Collins says her Attorney General's office will be different, starting with her race and gender. She's an African-American woman.
As women run, as more African Americans run, more minorities run, we bring a different perspective to the table. Now, that is not to say that anything is wrong with the way the Attorney General's office has been run. It's just a different perspective.
Collins is from Meridian. I asked her about the state flag. She's calling for a more unifying symbol for the state.
It's time to get rid of it.
Yes, it's time to make sure that all Mississippians are represented in this state.
Collins says she will focus on safeguarding civil rights, protecting consumers, combating the opioid crisis, and advising the state legislature to prevent wasting tax dollars in court.
The law is written by the legislature, right? So as Attorney General, I want to make sure that we are not setting ourselves up for lawsuits. And so advising the legislature on what is right and best for the state of Mississippi.
And as for continuing Jim Hood's work, Collins says she will keep up with the Children's Cyber Crime Unit and focus attention on protecting seniors as well. Gerald Harris, WJTV 12.
Well, Collins is running in the Democratic primary unopposed. There are 3 Republicans running for AG. Thank you for joining us for this week's edition of Mississippi Insight. A reminder, you can see a replay of the GOP gubernatorial debate tomorrow morning at 11 a.m. WJTV will be live this week at the Neshoba County Fair. I'll be out there along with Gerald Harris, Melanie Christopher, Chief Meteorologist Ken South, and Walt Grayson. Coverage starts Tuesday. And primary day is a week from Tuesday. We'll have full coverage leading up to that night on WJTV and WJTV.com. Until next Saturday, make it a good night.